Okay, thank you for that introduction, Brent, and welcome everybody today to the latest in our Opportunity Korea series of webinars. Today we'll be taking a look at the energy market and the exciting opportunities growing in the South Korean market. So, as mentioned, I will be your host today. This is David Flatter, Marketing Manager for UKTI Seoul. Today we'll be taking a look at Korea's energy strategies and the latest in government policies. We'll be taking a look at some of the major companies in the market. You'll be getting to know some of the key players and, more importantly, how to connect with them. We'll be talking about upcoming missions and how and why you should visit the market. And then, of course, we're hoping to leave ample time at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session where you can ask us any questions you may have. As mentioned on the side, today from UKTI we have Clifford Bebb, Head of Trade, Youngnan Lee, the Renewable Energy Trade Officer, and Yoonjin Lee, the Nuclear Energy Trade Officer. However, we have some unfortunate news for you today. Steve Duckworth from the BCCK has been called away at the last moment, so won't be attending with us today. He's had a bit of an emergency related to an oil spill you may have been seeing on the news, an oil spill in Thailand. Obviously, Steve's job as an environmental consultant, it's quite an important issue for him, so he's been called away at late notice. But we'll be doing our best to fill Steve's shoes for you today, and we'll hope to answer any questions as he would have. Okay? So if I may introduce to you today the Head of Trade for UKTI, Clifford Bebb. Clifford will be talking to you about Korea's market today.
Well, good morning, everyone. I say good morning with confidence as well. I've only just come back from the UK myself, so I think I'm probably more in the UK than Korea time zones, but just to give you a feel for what it's like in Korea this afternoon, about 30 degrees, very warm and muggy. Hope it's holding up where you are. It's certainly been a pretty good summer so far. So my job here in UKTI Seoul as Head of Trade is to help British companies to do business right across the spectrum of sectors where there are opportunity. I've been in the job for almost 4 years now, so hopefully I can share some of the knowledge I've accumulated during that period. But the real strength in our UKTI team in Seoul, as in our offices worldwide, is provided by our local staff, and you'll be hearing from them a little later. So thank you once again for your interest in our market and in this webinar. Having checked the list of registrations earlier today, I think on balance we have a pretty experienced audience as far as this market is concerned. By no means do we have a beginner's audience. So at the risk of perhaps skating too quickly over some of the generalities, I'll try and be as brief as I possibly can and as targeted on the subject as I can. So beginning with the key slide called Korea Today in front of you, the key point really for us and for you is that the Korean economy is at a bit of a crossroads right now, and you could include what you might call the energy economy in that. The new or new-ish Park Geun-hye government, which was elected last December, is still working up and bedding down new policies and initiatives. And I think more broadly in economic terms, Korea's high and fast rates of economic growth in the recent past after 2008 are compromised at the moment by a slackening in demand for its major exports, particularly ships. Consumer electronics, cars and the like, and overseas construction projects are also relatively flat, which means that economic growth is probably likely to come in this year around 2.5% to 3% tops, which is not bad by European standards, of course, but it just means that there's slightly reduced confidence economically and in business circles in Korea than I certainly became accustomed to in my first couple of years here. So that's something you should be bearing in mind in terms of understanding the latest sentiment among government and business people in this sector in Korea. So just moving on to a reminder of the current energy generation mix in Korea. I mean, the basics, of course, Korea yearns for greater self-sufficiency, but plans to expand coal and nuclear and to finally get renewables truly moving, particularly wind, all face real and substantive challenges. In coal, Korea has pushed its status and its credentials in leading on green growth and low carbon in Asia, in founding the Global Green Growth Institute, in hosting the Green Climate Fund, and in being the first mover on emissions trading. So deploying more coal-fired power really wouldn't be in keeping with that image. In terms of nuclear, the other easier and less costly option, post-Fukushima, of course, we saw a rise in anti-nuclear sentiment among stakeholders in Korea, obviously Japan being very close by. And more recently, we've seen a parts certification scandal, in fact, 2 rounds of that, which has further empowered opponents to the increase of civil nuclear generation here. So expansion of nuclear, as planned under the previous government, pretty much on hold right now. And of course, as in the UK and elsewhere, renewables are perceived, and perhaps this is a reality too, as comparatively expensive. And another factor is that Korean technology, core technology, is not necessarily ready for commercial deployment in sectors like offshore wind. So perhaps there's been to date an element of, well, let's wait until Korea is truly ready to take and to dominate its home market before we move forward with these serious commercial deployments in earnest. Here is a pretty clear illustration of the energy mix and its evolution over the past 12 years or so. I shan't dwell on this slide, and incidentally, just to confirm that you'll get these slides probably by email quite quickly after the session. So moving on to renewables, I just hinted at relatively slow progress to date. That key figure in the slide of only 1.7% of total generation contributed from renewable sources says it all, really. And if you take out hydropower from that, it's even less impressive. I think the balance of opinion, looking back on the Lee Myung-bak government that preceded the Park Geun-hye one currently in power, is that the international reputation for delivery on green growth and low carbon, that international reputation was much stronger than the realities at home. And a lot of the budget was spent on a controversial project called the Four Rivers project, which many people accused Lee of simply supporting the big construction companies through delivering. There's been a lot of research and development in the sector, but as yet not a lot of deployment. Under the Park government, to surprise in many camps, we've seen more recently a rejection of tidal barrage projects on environmental grounds. And I think that this indirectly will create an opportunity, an enhanced opportunity in offshore wind, as the utilities companies look up at this great challenge to meet their commitments under the new renewable portfolio standard to generate more power from renewable sources on a binding basis. So I mentioned the RPS. The previous feed-in tariff scheme, brought in 2002, again has been perceived by most as not having worked very well, not having ignited the market, and not many projects were considered by the financial sector to be bankable. So the RPS is the latest policy to stimulate growth in renewables, and you can see there the escalation in the percentage required from renewable sources. And the government is putting its money where its mouth is in investing to get these projects off the ground, recognizing that the financial sector is still anxious about prospects and bankability. So the market growth projections there under the last bullet are pretty impressive. So trying to hone in then on what the offshore wind opportunity looks like for UK companies in Korea. Well, I think we would take our lead from the big conglomerates, the heavy and E&C companies that Korea has, the Samsungs, the Hyundais, and so on, about whom we'll speak a bit more in detail later. They are now actively developing new wind turbine technologies, as some of you on the line know, and they're looking to adapt their offshore construction skills to get into offshore wind contracting. And of course, a number of you will be familiar with the interest of these Korean companies, certainly in UK Round 3. UK is very much a prime target market for this nascent Korean industry. And of course, to establish themselves in the UK, there will be a requirement for them to partner with you to gain a foothold, to gain more credibility to potential clients. So there's a particularly interesting opportunity here to grow relationships, perhaps initially in the UK, and then look to play those out here in Korea. Korea really does aspire to be a technology leader in this field, and the UK certainly seems to have the right complementary skills, technology and experience to support that growth. So moving on to nuclear, of course it's well known that Korea is one of the leading civil nuclear nations worldwide, with the 5th largest installed generation capacity. They have their own reactor technology, which is evolving. There's more than one model of the APR in commission, certainly as KHNP pursues opportunities in Finland. They've had to enhance the design to meet the standards there. I think the success for Korea in 2009 in the Emirates really shook the industry globally, especially the French competition, and it's been very heartening to see so many UK companies, from project finance to legal to equipment, components, design, modelling works, contributing to Korea's success early on in the project. And of course there's a long way to go, given the first of the 4 units won't be standing until 2017. So there's operations and maintenance, as well as ultimately back-end opportunities there. But I think this 11 or 12 UK companies already contributing to the project emphasizes the complementarity of what Korea's capabilities are in civil nuclear and what the UK can do, again, to support this success and to support Korea's delivery. On the other side of the coin, even though Korea's reputation internationally has been significantly enhanced by this win and by early progress, construction schedules being beaten at the moment, there's a real time of controversy at home, with Korean industry rocked and government rocked by these part scandals that I alluded to a little earlier. Over 20 KHNP employees have been found guilty of corrupt practices and successfully prosecuted, and 10 reactors are currently offline, which is actually increasing the possibility of summer blackouts as demand for power during this the peak warm weather continues. I think that Korea has an international reputation to preserve here that is in jeopardy, and the governments and the industry is very well aware of the risks of not taking early action and making sure that this scandal isn't repeated and tidying up the mess. It'd be well worth you continuing to follow what happens on this, and again, conversely, with Korea's challenges in this area, and with the UK having a favourable reputation for safety and security, this may open up more opportunities for UK parts suppliers, and for that matter for some of our consultancy companies. So there is some uncertainty, as I mentioned earlier, about whether the domestic new build plans, the very extensive ones announced by the last government, will actually proceed in their entirety, or at least partially. But one thing is certain, that the international ambitions to win new projects are firmly intact. And that's in spite of the recent failure to win the project in Turkey, where the Koreans lost out to a French-Japanese consortium, I think largely on the basis of financing and price competitiveness, where the depreciation in the value of the yen certainly gave the Japanese an advantage, as perhaps did their experience, albeit mixed in seismic zones where the Turkish plant will be located. Looking towards the back end of the fuel cycle, there are considerable opportunities, or there certainly will be at some point in the future, given that Korea doesn't have a coherent and integrated strategy for the management of spent fuel and decommissioning its many existing facilities, some of which have already been extended and their life cycle are really ought to be brought to an end according to international experts. Korea has some technologies, certainly as our last trade mission that visited last November found out from KEPCO, the state power utility, but many gaps in that capability. So the UK, with some of our early and ongoing experiences at the back end in the UK, certainly has a lot to offer Korea in this regard. In terms of waste, the 123 agreement with the US, which has recently been extended till 2015, does preclude South Korea from reprocessing on Korean shores or elsewhere. That slightly compromises the scope for cooperation in waste, but certainly at some stage in the future there will be an opening of that opportunity. We just have to make sure that we are preparing the British offer to counter any attempts by the Americans to try and keep that international opportunity for themselves. So certainly a lot of pressure on existing storage space for spent fuel. We're delighted, of course, that the Nuclear Industries Association signed an MOU, an industry-to-industry agreement, last November during that trade mission with KIFE, the Korea Atomic Industry Forum, and this is the perfect platform for UK companies to press for their goods and services to be purchased by the Korean side. One last point on the opportunity in nuclear. Like in offshore wind, perhaps not as immediate as an opportunity as in wind, but KEPCO and the Koreans are very interested in entering the UK's new build market. They certainly expressed their absolute interest to Ed Davies, Secretary of State for DEC, when he was out here recently, actually at the end of May, and they're certainly talking to a lot of the incumbent players, including GDF Suez, about what role they might be able to play, and they're ready with investment to back up their desire to get involved in the delivery of the next generation of civil nuclear plants in the UK, and that capacity to inject investment is certainly an attractive one to the Secretary of State and to DEC in their ambitions to deliver the next wave of civil nuclear infrastructure in the UK. So do look out for Korean progress in the UK. Okay, two more slides for me, just filling in for Steve Duckworth, who usually is an excellent supporter of UKTI efforts as the Vice Chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Korea and also the Managing Director of ERM here in Korea. Steve is very quick usually to emphasize that any past reputation that Korea had for trying to go it alone in large energy projects is really changing rapidly right across the piece, from oil and gas markets, traditional energy plant projects, to low carbon projects and indeed in nuclear, as absolutely evidenced by the partnership with the UK on the Abu Dhabi project. So Korea very much acknowledges the need for international partnership now if it is to create a new generation of success both in home and overseas markets. Some other factors that are driving this, well, overstretch. Korea doesn't have a lot of domestic activity at the moment for these giant construction companies to deliver. So to maintain their size, to feed their hunger, these Korean EPCs have to reach out for ever more challenging projects in energy markets worldwide, and with that ambition comes a lot more risk to manage. And of course clients these days are becoming more and more sophisticated in what they expect, as indeed the funding agencies are. So the Koreans very much need international support in order to fuel this next stage of ambition. Koreans are absolutely obsessed with making sure that their clients are entirely satisfied with their work. They will even take considerable losses on a project to preserve the relationship and to try to preserve their opportunity to win the next project with said clients. This means sometimes that they move incredibly fast, perhaps to catch up on falling behind on projects for whatever reason, and they sometimes set their partners in delivery some pretty unreasonable and unmeetable deadlines. Some of you will be aware of this. For those of you that aren't, you need to be ready for this, and you need to be highly responsive to the speed at which Korean companies work. And sometimes you need to be brave and bold, and in spite of you wanting to enhance your relationship with them because they're high-value clients, you may need to push back on some of their deadlines. If they give you 3 days and you can only do it properly in 3 weeks, you absolutely have to stand your ground and explain to them absolutely why that is. And most Korean companies do get the message in the end, although initially it can be a struggle at times. And the use of English in business, especially in contracting circles, is increasing rapidly. The younger generations of engineers in Korea are certainly very competent in English. And one favourable comparison, if you might call it favourable, I've heard recently from a number of UK companies is that unlike Japanese companies, there's a lot of devolution to middle managers and engineers on procurement and partnership decisions. So not everything has to go back to the big boss in Seoul or Ulsan for consideration. As I mentioned before, clients and funding agencies are increasing their standards all the time, which means that Korean companies have to up their game in terms of meeting those, and the UK has a lot of expertise in helping Korea to do exactly that. And the UK, of course, has a great footprint in many markets where Korea seeks to do more business. Commonwealth countries, the GCC, even in Latin America and Africa, where the UK's reach and experience in those markets and relationships, knowledge of how business is done can really help the Koreans to do well. And back here in Korea, where energy projects are expected to continue to take off, the business environment, the way business is done, slightly different. It's not that the regulation, the policy isn't sound, it's just that enforcement is sometimes looked at slightly differently, and Koreans find ways among themselves to solve problems in Korean fashion. So not always is it wise to reach back for that contract and to absolutely quote the letter of the contract to your Korean partners. It's much better to sort things out in an amicable and personal way. And that brings me on to just a couple of quick points on business culture. Where is business done? Steve asks this question. Increasingly, not necessarily by drinking copious amounts of soju after business dinners. The traditional heavy industry sectors, yes, that still goes on a lot, and if you're a man and you're doing business in Korea's energy sectors, you're probably going to have to encounter and overcome some of that tough work. But that's how personal relationships are made, that's how friendships are made, and that's how problems are overcome and how compromises are reached. But increasingly you find yourself doing business in the offices of Korean companies or in one of the millions of coffee shops that proliferate South Korea. These are relaxed environments where business discussions, especially in the early stages, can be had. So what are the Korean priorities? Just in conclusion, in business relationships, well, client is absolutely king. Winning projects is tantamount, even with very narrow or non-existent margins or no profitability at all. Delivery for that client is absolutely everything, and preserving the reputation with a view to winning the next project's absolutely king. So that goes for whether they're doing work for the Korean government, for each other in Korea, or for international clients. If you understand that and understand how you can pitch yourself to Korean companies in order to seal business partnerships that could be globally profitable for you, then you've absolutely grasped the opportunity and the nature of how to do it. So I'd like to thank you for your attention and to stop there myself. Now we'll hand over to the girls via David to explain to you a little bit more about the missions.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Cliff, for that extensive report about the Korean market currently and some of the history behind it. As Cliff mentioned, we'll now hand over to our trade officers to tell you a bit more about the specifics of the trade missions, tell you what you can expect to find if you do come to Korea. So first up, we have Youngran Lee. Youngran Lee is the head of our Renewable Energies team sector. So Youngran, can you please tell us some about the trade mission in October?
Okay, thank you, David. Before looking at the mission itinerary, let me introduce the key organizations who are involved in the program. We are organizing a workshop with the Korea Institute of Energy Technology Evaluation and Planning, which is KTEP. KTEP was established by the government under the Energy Action in 2009. KTEP set up the Office of Offshore Wind Power with the purpose of creating an advisory council in order to provide clarity to the industry regarding the mid to long-term goals for offshore wind power. This organization has a similar role to that of Renewable UK, and it will have to engage between industry and government. We have a 2.5 gigawatt offshore wind project in Korea, and KEPCO, Korea Electric Power Corporation, will lead this project with its 6 subsidiaries and consortium firms like Samsung, Hyundai, and Doosan, heavy industry companies who are developing an offshore wind turbine. Now we will look at the offshore wind mission itinerary, which is mostly similar to the nuclear mission. World Energy Congress WEC will take place in Daegu from 13 to 17 October. At WEC, we are organizing a joint UK networking reception with the UK WEC between 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. on 15 October. You can also have chance to look around the WEC exhibition before the reception. Next day, we will organize an offshore wind seminar followed by one-to-one meeting at Renewable Energy Korea LEG. Which will take place in Seoul from 16 to 19 October. LEG is the major renewable energy exhibition attracting all of the leading sector players in Korea. We expect about 100 people will attend the seminar. We will also hold a workshop with the KTEP and Korea Wind Energy Industry Association on Thursday, 17 October. From the workshop, you can find out more details of the 2.5 gigawatt offshore wind project and other offshore wind projects. The workshop will be very interactive as we will invite only key decision makers from project developers and consortium firms. Please be informed that we will have a UKTI information stand at both WEC and LEG events to display your brochures and to hold meetings.
Okay, thank you, Youngran. So that's a report from our Renewable Energy Trade Mission. Also, in the same week, almost the exact same time, we have a nuclear trade mission, which Yoonjin will tell us about.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Yoonjin Lee, and I'm leading on the nuclear sector in UKTI South. And I'm working on the nuclear trade mission, which will take place in mid-October. Today, I will tell you about the benefits you'd get by attending the nuclear trade mission and the program in detail, as well as the organizations you will be able to meet in Korea. First of all, this trade mission will be the chance for you to be able to present your expertise to key decision makers of major operator, regulator, and association members, as well as private companies. Let me tell you about 3 major organizations you'll be meeting through the mission. The first organization is Korea Atomic Industrial Forum. KAIS and UKTI will hold a joint workshop on the very first day. KAIS was established to promote nuclear energy in Korea. So it organizes domestic and international meetings, conferences, and seminars, and promotes international activities with foreign parties. So the case in point is MOU signed between KAIS and NIA last year to increase collaboration between two countries. And many of you must be aware of Korea Electric Power Corporation, KEPCO. This state power utility KEPCO was founded to facilitate the development of electric power supply in Korea and to meet the country's power supply and demand needs. And as Cliff mentioned previously, KEPCO has been very aggressive when it comes to overseas projects, and that certainly includes the UK. This is a government body with more than 30 subsidiaries in Korea and abroad. Also, Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power will be involved with the mission. KHNP is the largest among the 6 power generating subsidiaries that separated from KEPCO, accounting for approximately 25% of electricity producing facilities, hydro and nuclear combined. It is also mainly responsible for back-end fuel cycle management. KHNP also operates nuclear power plants in many regions, including Walsung, which we will visit in October when you come to Korea, and several hydroelectric power generation facilities providing approximately 40% of the national power supply. And of course, private companies like Tusan and Hyundai Heavy Industry will participate in the mission and the workshop. So now I'll walk you through the program for the mission. This is a 4-day program, and we recommend you to come to Korea on 13th of October on Sunday. We'll start with a mission briefing on 14th of October at the British Embassy, and the joint workshop with KAIS will be held in the afternoon. At the workshop, you'll be able to present to more than 100 audiences, including public, private companies, and SMEs. Also, KEPCO and KHNP will present what they focus at the moment and their plans in the near future and in the long haul. You will have time to talk separately with the Korean participants after the workshop as well. And the next day, we'll move to Daegu to participate in the World Energy Congress exhibition. My colleague Youngran just covered what we would do in Daegu on the 16th, so I'll skip it now. And the next day, the 17th of October, will be the day of site visits. First, we'll go to Walsung Construction Center and see how low and intermediate level radioactive waste is managed. Then we'll move to the Walsung Nuclear Power Plant, which is the second nuclear power plant in Korea. It has heavy water reactors and light water reactors, and also promotion center where we can see how nuclear power plants are managed and operated. Throughout the day, you'll be able to meet KHNP employees as well. And on the last day, we will come back to Seoul to go to Energy Korea exhibition. This is one of the biggest energy shows in Korea, and it deals with all kinds of energy topics such as renewable, nuclear, and smart grid, among others. And if we have some time, if we have some extra time, there is a possibility for a culture trip in Gyeongju, which is one of the most famous historical cities, before we come back to Seoul, but this is to be confirmed later. This is the end of the mission, and separately, we plan to have inward nuclear mission to the UK early next year. The dates of the mission will be fixed as we have the dates of the Civil Nuclear Showcase in London. It'll be a valuable opportunity for me to meet a number of UK companies in the field, and hopefully the UK companies will be able to meet Korean delegates to the UK as well. Okay, this is the end of my story.
Okay, thank you to Yoonjin and Youngran for presenting about their mission. Just to add, it's not all seriousness. There's also some fun on the mission. There's a good chance for you to get yourselves in the local media, as at that time we will be being joined by a double-decker bus from the United Kingdom. One of the big red London double-deckers will be on the streets of Korea and will be featuring at the WEC, REC and Trade mission. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to take some interesting photos there. We're also bidding currently for a minister to join us for some of these missions to join us for the WEC and REC events. So we're quite hopeful about that. And also just to mention, of course, these events, WEC and REC, are very well attended from all over the globe. So you won't just be meeting Korean delegates. You'll be meeting people from various countries around Asia, the Middle East, and further afield. Okay, thank you for your patience. We hope this was a interesting and enlightening presentation so far. Now we have 21 minutes, precisely 20 minutes for some of your questions. I'll hand back over to Brent, who can inform you about how you ask us your questions today.
Thank you so much, David. We're going to begin answering questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. If you prefer to ask your question verbally, you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand-raising icon in the Grab tab at the top left corner of your control panel. And if you have joined the webinar via telephone, please do enter your PIN number, which can be found in the audio pane of your control panel, so that we may unmute your line and you may ask your question. So our first question that came in today, David, was, are the 10 stations offline because of the scandal?
Pardon, sorry, Brent, can you repeat that a little louder?
Sure. When you were speaking about, when Clifford was speaking about the nuclear portion of the presentation, we had a question come in. Are the 10 stations offline because of the scandal?
Thank you, Brent. Answer the question, yes, absolutely. The concern here is, as I mentioned, one of clearing up the mess in a transparent and accountable fashion. The question that is on every Korean's minds is, are the civil nuclear plants in the country safe? And of course, if certain critical parts have had documentation falsified, then an absolutely comprehensive review of the plants and of the parts in question, when the plants in question are shut down, are suspended from operation, is the only way forward for Korea. So yes, absolutely. Not sure if Hyunjin would like to add anything to that answer.
No, we're okay for the moment. Thanks, Ben. Next question.
Okay, great. And I think a follow-up to that question was, are we looking at NCA agreement in addition to NIA and KI? I'm sorry, in addition to NIA KAIF?
Yeah, I can answer that one again. We actually discovered, this is the trouble perhaps with civil servants rotating every few years, but we discovered recently when we were looking at the possibilities for a government-to-government accord that we actually have one, believe it or not. It dates from 1991, and upon reviewing the language, both sides feel that it wouldn't actually serve our interest to look to reframe that or to extend it. We feel that the terms of the agreement allows us to cooperate on a government-to-government level in exactly the ways we'd like. So we do have one. So we have a government agreement and we have an industry agreement as well. So hopefully, as I said earlier, good platforms from which to launch further cooperation for commercial success ultimately.
Great, thank you. Our next question: would the trade mission to Korea be suitable for in-stream tidal power development companies, or is it focused on offshore wind?
Actually, this time we are focusing on offshore wind only. So we are inviting the audience for the offshore wind seminar and workshop as well.
Okay.
If I could just elaborate on that, we feel that there are good opportunities in tidal as well, but there's only so much we can do each year with the staff and the money we have. But we certainly, alongside our science and innovation team, we have good ideas for cooperation in the future in tidal, particularly in tidal current, where we have a plan next year to invite the key Korean stakeholders to go to EMEC in Glasgow and perhaps go and have a look at some other emerging technologies in the UK, just to start our work in tidal.
Fantastic. Next up we have, who is the leading 100 megawatt offshore wind demonstrator project?
Actually, I visit the Korea Wind Energy Industry Association this week, and the chairman of the association is running a company, and the company is actually developing 100 megawatt offshore wind farm in Jeju. I think you are talking about that project?
I would assume so.
Yes. Yeah. It is actually the commercial project.
Oh, okay, great. Was there anything else there?
No, we can certainly share with the inquirer if he notes, he or she, pardon me, notes Youngran's email address at the end. Jeju Island is obviously the island of the province of Korea, offshore the southern tip of the country, and that's been a location for a number of pilot projects in smart grids, for example, and including offshore. But this is full-scale commercial, so we'd be delighted to provide a bit more detail offline to anyone who's interested.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, can you update us on Korean plans to construct a tidal turbine test center? I understand they are now looking at tidal stream technology rather than tidal barrages.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, the Shiwa Lake tidal plant was intended to provide the fresh water to farm around the lake, but the Shiwa project failed and the water became more seriously polluted. That's why our government has canceled all the tidal barrage project. So we think we can see the potential of tidal current power in Korea. And at the moment, I don't really have the more detail on that. So I might contact more detail if you provide who actually ask the questions.
Of course,
sure.
As Youngran was saying, we're trying to answer a number of questions today. So, of course, if you ever want to follow up with us, the email addresses will be given out at the end, so we can always follow up with some company name specifics that we might not be comfortable discussing in the current situation.
Perfect, thank you. Next up, how many of the key wind turbine manufacturers would be attending the various meetings during the trade mission?
As I mentioned, we are organizing an offshore wind seminar, and there are 3 heavy industry companies like Samsung, Hyundai, and Doosan are developing offshore wind turbines. So most of them will attend the seminar and workshop as well.
Again, just a quick point to add to that, if I may. What we're doing on that day is collaborating with our investment team, which is looking to secure the investment of these companies into the UK, with a view to them competing successfully for offshore projects. So a part of the session will be dedicated to explaining the very latest on our energy policy, the energy bill, and EMR in the UK, and then our companies will have the opportunity to present how they can partner, what their skills and expertise is to partner with the Korean companies to help them fulfill their objectives. So I think we're pretty confident that because of the lure of the UK market and the opportunities finally maturing here in Korea, that we'll get all of them to come along. They certainly all came previously. The last time we did a mission on offshore wind in November 2011 with Lord Green supporting as Trade Minister, they all came. We had an overflowing audience, so it wasn't just the ones mentioned by Youngran, but also Hyosung and Dalium as well, and one or two others. So hopefully a full turnout from the Korean turbine manufacturers.
Great, thank you for that. Next up, we have regarding the current NCA, would it be worth drawing attention to it so the industry understands the desire of both governments to cooperate on nuclear?
Yes, I think it would be, absolutely. Again, we can only apologize for not making the most of this agreement and not bringing it to life in a more productive fashion before now. But certainly our intention is to do so from this point forward as we build up to the two missions. Yet very much in the contact we have with the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, a new ministry formed by the new government. We would hope to play on that, draw on that, in order to further encourage both sides to work together commercially. So we have to work that through with the Korean side, but yes, it's our intention.
Great, thank you. And just a couple more here. What are the opportunities for UK companies in the 2.5 gigawatt offshore wind project in Korea?
Thank you. Korea is dedicated to investing in offshore wind, and our government decided to develop a 2.5 gigawatt offshore wind farm by 2019. And Korea has no experience of developing an offshore wind farm, while UK is currently in the third round of wind power deployment. So although Korea is developing wind turbine, it will certainly require UK's other core technologies, including wind turbine development, connection to grid, environmental impact assessment, and wind assessment.
Okay, great, thank you. And lastly, will the recent safety accident create any opportunities, or how will it affect the opportunities for foreign companies and organizations?
Yes, this certainly can be the opportunity for foreign companies and organizations, for sure. We mentioned that 10 plants out of 23 paused, and some of them will be resumed operating, and some of them will go into waste. And it's been often stated that Korea has no policy nor the plans for waste management at the moment, and IAEA warned that Korea needs to implement rules and policies for radioactive waste management. However, Korea has no experiences, and at the moment it lacks technology and experts, and imminently Korea will have to invite experienced figures to come up with the answers to decommission old nuclear power plants in Kori and Wolseong. And the financial damage of the recent scandal and pause of the nuclear power plants is more than $1 billion US, and KHNP is under huge pressure to compensate the damage. It seems they have no other choice but to turn to international markets for the solution. However, it has not been announced what kind of measures will be implemented to solve the issues just yet.
Thank you very much for that. That effectively wraps up our question and answer period today. With that, I would now like to turn it back over to David Slatter for any final remarks. David?
Of course, thank you, Brent. Yep, so just to wind up here today, if you had any questions that weren't answered, don't worry, they are automatically sent to us. If you've already entered them in, they will automatically be forwarded to us, and we'll follow up on those. As we say, there's quite a few things we didn't get to discuss. It's a big topic, so you can note on your screen now the email address for Yongran Lee and for Yunjin Lee to get in contact. In the next few days, you should have an email following up, which will have a recording of this webinar, and we can also attach the PPT slides to those in case they're of interest. And yeah, so thank you for listening today. We hope this was productive and useful for you. And remember that our webinars begin on the week of the 14th, and feel free to follow up with any questions you may have for us.
Thank you very much,
Thank
David.
you, everyone.
Good
day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, Korea's Energy Market, Open for the UK Expertise. If you have any other questions, please do contact Clifford Bebb. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 7 days with details of how to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of UKTI and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.